there was a lot of talk about where are we going to get some water from Mount Vernon. Well, I was just kind of a new kid in town then, but I met with a group of people. There was about 12 or 14 of us that had several meetings to discuss how can we get some water from Mount Vernon. So we had these meetings, and guess what? They chose me as chairman of the committee. I was a new kid in town. I didn't know what I was doing. We started having meetings to discuss a water supply, a water source. My dad had a real good friend in Congress named Wright Patman, who was a United States representative. He called Mr. Patman and said, my son Charles is chairman of a committee that's working on a water supply for Mount Vernon and Franklin County, and he needs some help. He said, you tell Charles I'll call him. So Wright Patman called me. He said, what do you think you all want to do? I said, well, they talked about maybe building a lake on White Oak Creek. So he said, all right, I'll tell you what, let me get in touch with the Army Corps of Engineers, and I'll see if we can work out something and let them build a lake on White Oak Creek. This went on for a while. I'd say a 3 or 4 year study. Mr. Patman called me one day and said, Charles, I've got some bad news for you. The Corps of Engineers, after their study, said that this project on White Oak Creek was economically unfeasible. So that really, really depressed us. That put White Oak Creek out of the picture. So we come back, and as chairman of the committee, I called some meetings, and we talked about what else can we do? We've got to get some water. Started talking, having meetings, and some of us suggested, well, let's see about building a lake on Cypress Creek. Did some things there, and a good friend of mine named Neil Solomon ran for state representative in Austin and won. And the first thing that he did when he got there was he went to the Texas Water Development Board and presented this opportunity to build a lake on Cypress Creek.
Something unique happened in 1965 in that our state representative was appointed to be a judge. And as a result of that, he vacated his position and they needed to elect a new state representative. And in February, Neil Solomon ran for that special election and was elected as our state rep. So he went to Austin, and by June, we had already formed the Franklin County Water District. It was formed in June 1965. In September of 1965, there was an election. It was a bond election, $1.7 million bond election that was going to dictate whether we were going to have a lake or not. And it did pass by 28 votes. But it was totally a team effort on the part of the leadership in the town. Jim Bass, the editor and owner of the Optic Herald, was a key player in promoting the passage of the bond issue and the creation of the lake.
The bond only passed by like a dozen or so votes, as I recall, but it did eventually pass. Lake Cypress was built in a 50-50 deal with the state. The taxpayers came up with a bond election, provided half of the money to build Lake Cypress Springs. The state provided the second half of the money and said, you pay it back. They actually gave us a good break because they said, you can pay it back with water sales. TXU bought water for several years, and that money was applied to what we owed the state. And then eventually other water sales came along, and we were able to pay the state for what they had provided to build Lake Cypress Springs. But that didn't come early on.